In the book Everybody Lies, author and economist Seth Steven Davidowitz takes to study human psychology by collecting large amounts of data via Google searches and other sources of large data. He argues that this kind of data is revolutionary and that it's completely truthful in nature. His book is broken up into 3 sections in which he takes you through the reasons why this new kind of data is useful, the power that big data holds, and the caveats of big data. Part 1 focuses on the inability of our gut to truly gauge how the world works. Intuition alone cannot serve as data science, and Steven Davidowitz states that we should rely on more objective data to guide us and test our gut feelings. In Part 2, the power of big data, Steven Davidowitz dissects the 4 powers of big data. The 4 powers are the ability to offer up new types of data, provide honest data, the ability to zoom in on data, and the ability to perform many casual experiments. This part of the book is filled with many shocking facts, pointing back to the first part of the book to prove the faultiness of our instincts. Part 3 covers the limitations associated with big data. He mentions the curse of dimensionality, in which there are lots of variables and not that many observations. He explains that there are just some things you can't measure, and the solution to some questions is not always big data. He ends the book with a message that social science is becoming a real science that can improve our lives and benefit many. A major part of this book is the way that Google data is able to trump conventional sources of data such as surveys, which are inherently flawed. As seen within the book, people are naturally inclined to lie to themselves as well as others. Google search trends can provide truthful data that was never available before. He finds many interesting and convincing facts, such as parents are more likely to think their son is gifted than their daughter is gifted, or Super Bowl advertising is actually undervalued, which I'd like to talk more about later on in the review. However, when reviewing the data, it would have been nice for the author to document some data set numbers to accompany his findings. Because size is unknown, it makes it impossible to determine if the correlations are based on large or small data sets, and we can't assume that they are large just because the book is about big data. The addition of this into the text would have been helpful at solidifying his arguments. In addition, another idea to consider is the bias that Google searches hold. Steven Davidowitz notes that Google will display a bias towards unseemly thoughts, and I think this idea should be considered a little more than he lets on when reading the book. For example, it's easier to say that there are more people who Google, "I wish I never had kids," than "I regret not having kids," when the phrase, "I love that I have kids," would likely not be Googled. A big takeaway for me in this book is that big data isn't just important for companies, it has huge implications for consumers. As covered in the book, big data can aid in tackling some major issues, such as detecting child abuse. I think that both consumers and companies can utilize big data in a way that is beneficial to all, as this resource is not only for large companies. Larry Alton mentioned a few ways that data improves our everyday lives, such as helping consumers get the best price for products, relaying to businesses what they want in products, and even encouraging better experiences in traffic with data-controlled GPS. I find it interesting when Steven Davidowitz wrote about the effects of marketing and the ability to truly test their impact. Because I'm a marketer, this aspect of the book really intrigued me. Before big data, cause and correlation were hard to pinpoint in marketing, and the fact that the Super Bowl event was able to pull a correlation of movie ticket sales and advertising is huge. And moving forward, I think this use of big data will only make it easier and easier to understand consumer motives and cause and effect relationships within marketing. Using things such as Google search trends and social media habits will only help marketers further develop their campaigns. As with all things, there are always negative implications. Steven Davidowitz uncovers a lot of these issues in the last part of the book, and many of them are quite relevant in the big data world today. Unethical actions such as discrimination and targeting are not only problems within this book, but within the whole marketing world. Pedro Eurico states that this issue of ethicality rises, especially as companies begin monetizing their data externally for purposes different from those from which the data was initially collected. The scale and ease with which analytics can be conducted today completely changes the ethical framework of data, as seen with the ease of availability for conducting Google searches, data searches in this book. Some might argue that this data is private, and when companies start using it to approve and decline loans, an ethical problem has developed. I'd also like to note at the end one disagreement I have with Steven Davidowitz. His book is very colorful in the spectrum of human sexuality, and he holds a generally positive opinion on what Google searches could mean for encouraging openness and vulnerability within relationships. Galen Strawson, another reviewer for this book, mentioned that she believes the easy availability of pornography is turning out to be one of the greatest strategies of human history, destructive of the best kind of sexual relations, which I would say I fully agree with. Overall, I thought the book was an interesting, albeit depressing read. It certainly can be used as a framework for going forward in the big data era, and many of the powers mentioned of big data can be further utilized to develop the social science as well as our lives. I never thought I'd see an Amarillo, Texas shout out in a New York Times bestseller, but here we are, and I obviously can't trust my gut feeling.